Bonjour, Melissa Posada, Indigenous Cause, um, Hibbing, Minnesota, and Dunjaba. Um, I'm here to discuss the importance of voting, and I think Deb's already reached out and said why we're here. So I'm just reiterating that. So we're gonna have this uh, aired throughout and all the way into November. So that's why we find it so important, and I really appreciate each one of you coming today. And I apologize for my lateness. Um, so we started with the first question. Is that correct? Deb?
We already did the first one.
Well, let's ask it again, just to make sure we know what it says.
I forgot what I said.
When you were young, what were you taught about voting? Should we start over here?
When you were young, what were you taught about voting? Anybody can just jump right in.
Nothing.
Nothing either.
No.
I accept for the reds, then I knew every 4 years you'd get some wild rice. So,
You get some what?
wild rice.
Oh. So they'd give you wild rice to vote?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
I mean, not me, my mother.
Yeah.
Oh, when you were younger?
Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I knew. I didn't know about voting for presidents or anything like that. I had no knowledge of that until I got into high school.
You know, I wonder if that was because we weren't allowed to vote until 24, right? 1924.
Yeah, 19.
We weren't citizens until then. So it probably didn't make a big deal on the res who was running for president and all that stuff.
So historically speaking, we weren't considered part of the United States government, so maybe in our minds we didn't see that we were part of it ourselves. Is that correct?
That's what I'm thinking. Because that would have been my mother and dad's age. So, what was the sense of voting if we had no idea?
Yeah, I don't even remember learning anything about it at school.
Bedanakot na Disneycast Mong na Dudane, the Sinanakwa and the Nomaniki and Dunjaba, Dale Green. My maternal grandfather from Sawyer, Minnesota, was a World War II veteran. I've always thought of him as being a progressive type of Anishinaabe. He had moved his family from Sawyer after World War II, first to Duluth, where I was born, and then Minneapolis. He was proud to be an American World War II veteran, but even with his progressiveness, there was things that bothered him about the country. He had served honorably in World War II, and when he came back home, he was still, I don't even want to say a second-class citizen. He may have been a third or fourth-class citizen, where even though he served, he would not be served alcohol in the bars and in liquor stores because it was still illegal for Indians to go into liquor stores and bars up until 1953 here in Minnesota. He, after getting out of World War II, was a truck driver for 22 years. His CB handle was Chief of Duluth. And he was proud that in his 20 years of truck driving, he had been to every state in the lower 48. And he was a proud Democrat voter. My earliest memories about anything, I can still hear my grandpa saying that we're Democrats. The Democrats represent the the farmer labor union, and I would imagine I, being one of his 68 grandchildren, was brainwashed into believing that the Democratic Party was the party that represented us. In those years before I knew that they're basically the same party. That's what I remember.
I remember when I was a little kid being asked in school, well, you know, who are you going to vote for the president? I remember that. I was in 3rd grade, and I didn't know who the president was, or who the candidate was for president. And so I went home and I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, who are we supposed to vote for president? And he's like, it doesn't really matter because they don't represent us. And I talked to my grandpa about that, and he's just like, well, we need to make them represent us. We have to be loud enough. And I never understood what that meant until I was 16. And I talked to my grandpa again, and I said, Grandpa, what do you mean by be loud enough? And he said, well, when you can vote, then they have to listen because that's what they're paid to do. And I didn't know that it was a paid position. I thought if you're a leader, you lead because it's the right thing to do. Silly me. But I did start voting when I was 18, and I've been kind of a hothead, and I think everybody knows that. So I really pushed for my kids to vote because, like you said, that wasn't always a right that we had. So the right for us to gather and have a gathering for religious reasons wasn't until just about the same time we voted. Isn't that correct? Like well, actually, that was in the 1960s when they finally let us start gathering again. So I think it's really important to not only gather but also use our voice, use our vote. And that's all I have to say about that.
What was the question again? Can't help it. I have ADHD. See a squirrel, I'll take off running too.
I thought it was sometimers.
First time.
Oh yeah, the first
When
time.
you were young, what were you taught about voting? Yeah.
I don't even remember it in school. I remember my mother liked the Kennedys, but I don't know that they went and voted. Like everybody wears the little sticker nowadays.
Yeah. I voted.
Yeah. I don't think anybody ever voted because even when I moved back here, I was part of the relocation program. When I moved back over here, 30 years ago, we already voted where we lived in Indiana because my kids were old enough to vote. And they learned about it in civics class. And so when they started to vote, we all started to vote. Make sure that they did the right thing. Yeah. And voted for who I told them to.
Damn it.
That's very interesting. Traditionally, I had mentioned earlier, I was fortunate that Jim Northrup would come in and practice his writing or his presentations, and he had talked about in Sawyer in the late 40s, early 30s, they would argue over whose turn it was to go to the TE's Tribal Executive Committee meetings, and they would collect the number of of votes on who from a particular community, family wanted to represent them, and they would argue over whose turn it was to go. So it was an obligation to serve, and at that time there wasn't really a financial reward to go and do those things. They may have been compensated with $2 or $3 to help them get to those meetings. You know, as I look around, there's some people that will still remember my cousin Mashul. You know, all my life I can remember him saying the one person, one vote wasn't ours, that it wasn't cultural, that it was a foreign concept, and that our families and communities, we weren't led by those that have compulsory authority or power to say, all right, somewhere else the majority of the people voted for this, so you're stuck with having to follow them. If the family or village wanted to do something, they did it, and they then ostracized people that didn't want to be forced to go along with the decision that the majority would make. So I've always struggled with the one man, one vote, or one person, one vote concept as it not being cultural for us, that we did things in the family community block. So when a head person, a matriarch or patriarch, told us who to vote for, maybe that's too strong of a statement. My grandfather and his sons, they never told anyone who to vote for, but would say something like, this is the person our family's going to vote for. This is who the person that best fits what our family needs. Which was probably a very polite way of saying, I told my kids to vote for it. So thanks, Gene, for triggering that memory. So Mashkoop would also then throw in, yeah, you could have the best platform in the world. You could be getting everybody to agree with, so that they're going to vote for you. Then they would go to the polls and vote for their relatives.
Yeah, I remember my grandfather, every election cycle when I started voting, he would always answer his phone because he knew I was going to call him and ask him, Grandpa, who do you think we should vote for? Who's got our best interest in mind? And he goes, I knew you were calling today. And so we'd sit and talk for a while about the person that he thought was the right person to be president or governor or whatnot. I'm like, and I was young, so I didn't think it was that big of a deal to research, but I knew my grandpa knew what was going on. And so I would always vote the way my grandfather said to vote, because, it was important. Those were issues that were important to him. And if they were important to him, then they were important to me, because it was all about family.